So before we dive in and code our first HTML web page, we need to talk about the main elements of a web page. So the notes in this video will actually match your packet very, very closely. So you'll want to take out your notes packet, and then we're going to walk through the main elements that we'll be looking at, particularly in this unit, that are on an HTML web page. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify the different components of an HTML web page, and by the end of this unit, you'll be able to add in HTML tags to create a basic website, and this includes things like paragraphs, headings, images, horizontal rules, things like that. So this first learning target is really our learning target for this lesson, and then the second learning target we'll begin discussing in this lesson, but then it will continue throughout the rest of the unit. So I just want to reiterate and recall a couple of things from the lessons we've covered so far. Remember, these are the 5 phases of the web development lifecycle, and these first 3 in particular are very important to the website design process. So we're going to start looking at the planning, analysis, and design and development phases as we begin to create our first website. So we'll still do the testing, implementation, and maintenance phases, but these first 3 are really what are the meat and the most important as you plan your first websites. Another thing to keep in mind throughout this lesson is that HTML is focused on the use of what are called tags. So remember, tags help us to define the structure, the layout, the appearance. They allow us to format different documents. So we're going to use tags throughout this process of coding in HTML to actually create our web pages. And then just recall that we're going to use a text editor called Notepad or Notepad++. You'll be able to pick which one you'd like to use. And remember that in order to view our code and to see what it actually looks like, we're going to practice viewing them in a web browser. So every time we begin a new unit, what we're going to do is we're actually going to code a practice web page together. And this particular unit, we're going to create what's called a campus tutoring service website. So I'm going to show you what it's going to look like, and then throughout the next few lessons we're actually going to code this website together, and that'll kind of be the main part of every single unit. Is we'll talk about the tags, we'll talk about the concepts, and then we'll apply it together, and that will be a group web page, and then when you move on to the project, that will be a website that you actually create on your own. So on this particular website, we're going to include general information, contact information, and a list of courses that are needed for tutoring. And we're going to use paragraphs, bulleted lists, colorful images, horizontal rules, background colors, and etc. So you'll be able to use all of those elements in your HTML documents by the end of this lesson. So what you see in front of you is the web page that we're going to create by the end of this entire unit. So we won't make this web page in this video, but it will be something that we're building throughout the other lessons. So a couple of things to note are that we have this yellow background color here. So we'll learn how to put background colors in. This piece right here is what's called a horizontal rule. This is actually an image. And then you can see various headings, paragraphs, lists, etc., etc. So we're going to input all of these elements into an HTML document, and it will end up looking like what you see on the screen in front of you. So before we start coding, I want to talk about the main elements of a web page. And I've broken it up into element types. And so you'll see as you go through your notes that the first element type we're going to talk about is called a window element. And there are 2 main window elements that we use in HTML. The first is called your title. And I'll show you where the title is when we get to the next slide. But the title is what appears in the title bar of your browser. So when you have your actual browser window, and you see like a little tab and it has some words on it, that's called your title. And that title is what gets assigned to your favorites and bookmarks if the user chooses to add it to their favorites or their bookmarks. So when you save a web page and those words automatically pop up in there, that's the title. And this should be something that is concise because it shouldn't be super long or you're not going to be able to see it. But it also needs to be descriptive. So make sure that it relates to your website. It kind of captures the heart, the main focus of your web page. Now the second main window element that we'll include on every web page is called the body. And this really contains all the information that gets displayed inside of your browser window. So that's really the most important information. That's everything that you see So everything you see is on the body. So kind of keep that in mind. So we have our two main window elements, the title and the body. Now if you look here on this web page, you can see the title and the body. So you can see that this title is right up here in your browser window at the very, very top. And again, that's what would appear in your favorites or your bookmarks if you were to save it. And then the body is everything else. This is the body of your web page. So we have the title, that's this part right up here, and then the body is everything that you see. So anything that you want displayed on that website, that's called the body of your web page, and it will be contained inside what are called body tags. So you'll always be able to identify the body of your HTML page. So after window elements, the next type of elements we have are called text elements. So these are what appear to be text on a page, but there's different roles of text. So we're going to talk through what the main text elements are. The first is just that normal, everyday, informational text. It's used for the main content of your web page. All of this can be formatted to be different colors, different types of fonts, different sizes. It can be bold, it can be underlined, it can be italicized, but this is just the main content. So that's called your normal text. And the second type of text element is called a list. And these are items that are grouped in some way, they are related in some way. They can be bulleted or unordered lists. They can also be numbered or what are called ordered lists. So maybe you have information that needs to be numbered 1, 2, 3, or maybe you have something that just needs to be bulleted. So we'll talk through both types of lists, but these are things that are grouped or listed together. And then the third type of our text elements is called the headings. And in HTML, we actually have 6 different headings total. You can see H1 is the largest heading, H6 is the smallest heading. And this is really used to set apart different paragraphs or sections of text. So they're used as like titles of this is my main information paragraph. This is my list of my favorite teachers. It basically gives paragraphs, lists, etc. a title. And you're consistent normally as you use these, and you can see down here I kind of made some notes for you. Whereas H1, that biggest heading, would be used for the biggest words on your page. So maybe the main heading right at the middle at the top of the page. And then as you go down and you have headings within headings, maybe you have subheadings, you start to use H2, H3, H4, etc. So as you work your way down into subheadings, you start using the smaller headings. So you use that biggest H1 right off the bat as a main heading on your page, and then you'll use the smaller ones depending on where they apply. Alright, so here you can see our main text elements in action. We have 2 different types of headings here. This heading is what's known as an H2 heading, and this heading right here is what's known as an H1 heading. We then also have this normal text. Sometimes this is actually called a paragraph of text. It's just the paragraphs on the page, the main content. And then you also have lists here where this is an unordered list. Remember, you can have unordered or ordered lists on your page. So these are our 3 main text elements. We have headings, we have normal texts, and we have lists. Now, our next main type of element category are called image elements. And we call an image in HTML an inline image because it falls in line with our text and it kind of has to be formatted to go around it. So something to keep in mind about these image elements that we're going to be using is that the image is not a part of that HTML file. So really keep that in mind. It is not a part of the file. It's actually its own separate file, and we actually link that picture to our HTML file. And when we run our HTML file in a browser, the browser merges the image into the display of the web page. So that's something to keep in mind, is that that image is absolutely not a part of the HTML file. It's something that we link to, and it's a separate file that we need to keep in a special place so it can be merged into the display. Now, inline images will use what are called the image tag, and we'll talk about that later in one of the videos. But what that image tag does is it will tell the browser which image file it's going to include, where to insert it, and exactly how to display it. So it'll say, insert this picture after these words, and display it with a width of this and a height of this. So you'll be able to give those specifications as you complete your website. So here you can see our inline image in action. It's actually this piece right here where it says Student Services, Campus, Tutoring Services. That is actually an inline image, and an image that we've merged into our HTML file. So on the screen here you see some specific types of inline images. Now we won't really go into these in this chapter. Image maps and hotspots are really something we focus heavily on in a later unit, but you should be aware of these particular words. So I know that the definition here of an image map is pretty vague, but it says an image map has one or more hotspots. And then it says a hotspot is an area on an image that activates a function when selected. So what this means is you may have a picture. Say I have a picture on my web page and maybe it's split into fours, and this web page says swimming, this web page says school, this web page says music, and this web page says cat. So these are some things that I love. I teach at a school, I swim, I listen to a lot of music, my boyfriend teaches music, and I have a cat. So what a hotspot is an area on an image that can be clicked. So say, for example, that this entire area of your image can be clicked. So that swimming area can be clicked, and it'll take you to my swimming page. Well, if there's a clickable region, that clickable region is called a hotspot. So if you have an image and you've mapped it out so an area on that image can be clicked and it'll link to another place, that's called a hotspot. And an image that is made up of hotspots is called an image map. So we're going to talk about these later on. How do we create an image where when we click on different areas of that image, it'll link to different web pages? Maybe that part in blue will link to a school swimming page, but this part in green will link to a school page, and this part in yellow will link to a music page, and then this part in black will link to a cat page. So maybe I have 4 different areas that can be clicked and they link elsewhere. Each individual spot is called a hotspot, and then from there the whole image itself, the image that contains these hotspots, is called an image map. Finally, you can see the third type of inline image down below. It's called an animation, and this includes some sort of motion where the picture on the screen can be changed. So looking at inline images, you need to know the term image maps, hotspots, and animations. And then finally, the last thing that I classify as an image element is called a horizontal rule. And you saw this on the previous page where we had the entire web page body, and you saw that line going across the screen. So these are horizontal lines that are displayed across a web page, and their biggest purpose is to separate that web page just into different sections. So say you want this first section to be about your athletics at your school, and the second section to be about the music department at your school. Maybe you have this all contained in one web page and you want to split it up. Horizontal rules are an absolutely great way to do that, and they can be done by using this tag here. And we'll look at a horizontal rule a little bit later on in this unit where you'll actually be able to add in the horizontal rule tag. But whenever you add this tag in there just as it is, it will actually draw a line right across the page. And then what we can do is we can actually use an inline image in there if we'd like to make it a little bit fancier. So you can link an image in, and you could make it a little more stylish if you wanted to. But those horizontal rules are the last piece of image elements that we'll look at in this particular unit. Alright, so here you can see that horizontal rule. It's a pretty basic one here, but we put in that HR tag, and there's our horizontal rule. Alright, so one last plug about image elements. They are fantastic. They can really brighten up your web page. They are great. But something to keep in mind is when you learn how to put images into your website, really make sure that you have some caution. Because while images are great, they can also be overdone. And we don't want to overdo it. We don't want our page to look cluttered, or we don't want the user to look at our page and have no idea what's most important. Because images can really distract somebody on a web page. Instead of actually looking at some of the content, they just see the pictures. So make sure that you don't overdo it, and make sure that this last bullet point is really true. Make sure that each image that you put on a web page really has a good, true, honest purpose. You put that picture there for this specific reason, whether it's to catch a user's eye, or it's the logo for your school and you want to advertise that logo, or whatever it may be. Make sure that image has a purpose. And lastly, the fourth type of main element group that I want to look at are what are called hyperlink elements. So you'll notice here I have two key new vocabulary words. They are very, very similar. A hyperlink is, and notice the definition very carefully, is text, image, or other web page elements that you click that tells the browser to go to a different location in the page, to a new page, or a new web page. So a link tells the browser to go somewhere else. And remember, we've talked about the fact that links really do make up the World Wide Web. So a hyperlink can be text, an image, or any other web page element. So it could be a list item, it could be a table, it could be whatever you want it to be. A hyperlink in general is text, image, or some other HTML element that when you click on it, links somewhere else, goes to a new location. Now, a hypertext link is really just a more specific word for saying a text-based link. So this is something that is text. So it is a paragraph or a couple of words in a paragraph. It is a heading that clicks somewhere. It is a list item that moves somewhere. It is text-based. It's not an image. It's not something else. It is text-based. And usually what happens when we have a text link is it will appear underlined and it will appear in a different color than the rest of the text. So when we really start adding these hyperlinks in during Unit 2, you will notice that those unclicked links are blue. The clicked links are purple. The active links are red. You'll start seeing the different colors, and you'll start seeing that underline feature that's associated with links. So those are our four main types of elements. We have window elements, text elements, image elements, and hyperlink elements. And then you should know the details of each of those elements and what specific type of elements kind of stem from there. So at this point, you are ready to move on to the worksheet for this particular lesson. And then the next videos will start getting specific with the tags, and they'll start moving you into coding your first web pages.